Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Sunday, October 17th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me for yet another coffee chat as I drive around and share my thoughts with you on this beautiful, beautiful Sunday morning. It is absolutely gorgeous where I'm at right now. Very, very fall-like weather in the 50s, but the sun is shining and it is absolutely gorgeous. The leaves are changing colors, and really it's an indication to me as I drive around and reflect on my thoughts that we're really entering this dying of an old system, and we're about to embark upon the greatest adventure. We really already have embarked on that adventure, but I mean it's really about to kick into high gear. I truly believe in the coming days and in the coming weeks. And I've been saying repeatedly that I don't believe that we're months away at this point, because when you start talking about months at this point in the game, um, I mean, sure, it's possible that when it's all said and done, it could be months from now. But when you're talking about months before we actually see some type of actual action, I think that that's probably unrealistic because, again, we have an election system, a voting system that's completely broken. And the American public is keenly aware of that now. I mean, there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, as they say. And people aren't going to vote. I mean, Trump put out a statement just the other day, very short and sweet. If we don't actually get justice for the 2020 election, then Republicans aren't going to vote in 2022 and in 2024. And that's the absolute most important thing that Republicans can do, which is vote. I mean, Trump, I don't know how many times he's made it clear, crystal clear, that he's not letting go of 2020, and he understands the implications in terms of our confidence in our system. I mean, if we don't have an electoral system that we can have confidence in as a whole, as Americans, then we don't even have a country. And sure, I know that a lot of you are sitting there going, well, yeah, I know we haven't had a country in a while. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir, but this is, to me, prima facie direct evidence and truth that Trump is not backing down. And he is sending a message to all of us who are really paying attention, who really know what's going on. And by the way, those numbers are increasing every day. He's telegraphing what's really going on behind the scenes here. And sure, we can hear stories about Trump's people and, his advisors telling him, oh, sir, just move on to 2024 and this and that. And Trump himself tells those type of stories, I think, to keep it, in essence, kind of mainstream. Because you got to remember, Trump is still talking to a lot of people out there. A lot of his supporters are still watching Fox News. They're still trapped inside the matrix. And Trump has to communicate with all of us. But it's pretty clear what's happening here. That all of the chips are in play. And everything is exactly where it should be at this exact moment. The Durham investigations, all of that stuff this is just the beginning, folks. I mean, the Sussman indictment, to me, what everybody called a nothing burger, and everyone got so upset about, to me, that was probably one of the most significant developments that we've seen. And it's brilliant because it seems as if there's nothing there. If you're one to continually go along with the mainstream propaganda that perception is reality, and we talked about this the other day. If you're going to buy into that concept, then yeah, it looks as if, oh well, they're just going after this one attorney with one charge, no big deal, nothing really to see here. But when you think about it, you just stop and you think about it for a second. What does that indicate? What does that telegraph to everyone? Well, that is a very clear indication that this guy is a cooperating witness. And he's in a position to provide evidence and intel to go after the bigger fish. It's very simple, the strategy that the White Hats are using. But simple doesn't mean fast, as we know. Simple is a long process, but this is what's been happening. This is what's going on. And I talked about how the tipping point, it's going to be a very slow process. It's been a very slow process, but when that tipping point actually gets hit, if you want to look at it like I described it yesterday as a pendulum, swinging in one direction as far as it can possibly go, as far as the momentum will take it, the momentum of the people, the environment, the culture, the entire political landscape, geopolitical landscape all across the world, as far as that pendulum will go in that one direction, and then boom, there's going to be a turning point. There's going to be an instant turning point that's going to start the process moving in the other direction. I don't think we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen it yet. Some people might actually even argue that, we've already started to move in that other direction. I am of the opinion that I'm just going to stick it with that pendulum analogy. We're really approaching the final days even. I know I said that before, and you know how I feel about timelines, but I'm just telling you what I think and what I feel at this moment is that we're only days away from the final movement of that pendulum as far as it's going to go in the direction that we've seen it headed, at least on the surface anyway, for the past several years. And of course, the most intense part being this past year after this election was stolen. And we all know it was stolen. There's no two ways about it. And what they're doing right now is they're allowing all of the evidence to come out. But not only that, there's a process that has to go on where all of the evidence is tied together, like I talked about. And everything is presented in a very, very methodical way so that no mistakes are made when presenting this case, both legally or in a military tribunal or just in terms of the court of public opinion, not just here in America, but all over the world. All of this information is going to come out. And it is coming out. I mean, there's no denying the amount of information, the amount of intel that's come out over the past several weeks from all these different sources. I mean, there's no denying that the drip has increased to a steady flow. I mean, every single day we're finding out more information. More damning information is coming out about the cabal, and the mainstream media, of course, they're doing what they always do. They're playing their confidence game. And I have to hand it to the mainstream media. In terms of their confidence game, they really, really do an excellent job. I mean, I hate them with every cell in my body, but I mean, the way that the cabal has been able to present this illusion is truly, it really is amazing when you think about it. The fact that what you see, the version of reality that they sell you in that little on that screen is so compelling. I mean, it's all scientific. It's all, they're using off-world advanced tech to manipulate us and to literally control our minds using magnetics. But without getting into that, I mean, it's quite obvious because even someone like myself, I consider myself to be pretty awake. But when I start watching the mainstream media, and again, I always talk about how I try to avoid doing it because for me, watching CNN is it's like standing in front of it's like standing in front of someone swinging a baseball bat. I mean, it's just, I feel like I'm being attacked when I watch mainstream media. But I have to acknowledge at the same time, when you watch it, it's so slick and it's so confident. And the deception is so complete and so cold-blooded that it's not hard to see why even people like myself at one point in my life had no issue questioning. I had no question in my mind that what I was watching was actually real and that was a portrayal of what was really going on in the world. They do an amazing job. I mean, they suck you right in. There's no question about it. And I have to sometimes I have to sit back and remember that, because for the people out there who, in my own life who aren't awake, I have to sit back and remember that. I mean, even for me, when I go over, let's just say to a relative's house or to a friend's house or something, and they have the TV on, and we're just sitting there talking, and I'm just kind of glancing at the TV and this and that. Next thing I know, I mean, I can be fully fixated on what's happening in that screen. Now I'm looking at it and processing it in a very different way that they are, of course, but it's very hypnotic. Now, the TV, I ought to do an episode on the history of TV at one point, because it really is fascinating the way that they indoctrinated everyone with TV way back in the early days. And Hollywood, of course, was before that even. And how they were able to earn everybody's trust. I mean, I said cold-blooded a minute ago. I mean, really, this has all been a part of an elaborate plan to destroy humanity. A multi-generational plan. And that's, of course, what the enemy does. They just keep reincarnating and coming back. That's why they play the long game. I remember at one point thinking to myself, when I was first waking up and learning about all this, thinking to myself, well, why would these people want to, spend their whole lives dedicated to some evil plan that they would never even see come to fruition in their lifetime? Seems to me like that would kind of lack the basic motivation of having some satisfaction at the end of all your efforts. But then I came to understand that these people, as I call them, they're not really people. That these creatures who are not, I mean, at the top, they're not human at all. But I mean, these reptilian beings, I mean, they just keep reincarnating and coming back. And it's just the enormity of this whole thing. It's very, excuse me, it's very easy for me to sometimes forget that to the people who are uninitiated and have no idea about any of this stuff. I mean, the TV is still a formidable weapon. Now, I think, having said that, I think there are more and more people who are having that fundamental disconnect in their brains starting to happen. Whether or not they're being vocal about it yet is another story. But like I've said, I mean, I think at this point, if you have any sense of integrity at all, in terms of wanting to really verify that the information you believe to be true actually is true. I mean, if you have any of that at all, at this point in time, you have to be questioning what you're seeing on TV, despite the fact that it's such a slick presentation of this matrix, of this illusion of reality that they want you to believe. I mean, anybody with any sense of integrity at this point is starting to have different experiences. I talked about the other day, and 107 talked about this, that at the grassroots level, the mainstream media, they can't prevent people from actually having their own personal life experiences. And at a certain point, people have to start saying, well, wait a second. How come my experience is so different from what they're talking about on TV? Because I think for a lot of people, they've been so isolated, and I mean, especially with with all of the lockdowns and everything else, the other purpose that served was getting people to be glued to their TV more and more, and less and less interaction with their fellow humans, of course, because they want to just further program everyone. And so it's gotten worse. But I mean, people, the programming runs really, really deep. And at this point, it's very interesting to see. And in some cases, it's encouraging to see people start to question that part, that integrity in their soul just starting to creep out from underneath a rock after 40 or 50-year nap, and saying, wait a second, this doesn't sound right. Some element of their conscience waking up. those are the encouraging stories that you hear about sometimes. And unfortunately for me, I don't hear many of those. What I do is I continually witness the opposite. The sad reality, it seems, that some of these people are just, the programming has completely overwritten their sense of identity, even their ability to, and to me, your sense of identity is your free will. Your ability to make decisions for yourself is what gives you, in terms of your soul, your spirit, your personality. I mean, that's what constitutes you. But they've been overwritten with this programming. And sure, they still have a personality, and they still have things that we love about them. But in terms of their ability to think, in terms of their ability to actually exercise independent thought, I mean, they're completely gone. It's a sad thing. It really is. And these are the people that I think are going to be, the ones we're going to be most worried about. At least I'm going to be the ones that I care about in my life when all of this stuff comes crashing down. I think the people who are awake now, I mean, the way I kind of look at it is the more awake that you are at this point, before all of this information comes flooding out into the mainstream, the more of in a sense, a protective barrier God has put around you. I mean, I've talked about this quite a bit lately, and the deeper I get into this journey, I feel as if the closer I get to God, and it becomes more and more obvious to me that this is all spiritual. It's always been spiritual, and all of the things that I considered to be, at one point in my life, almost like a curse, having to know all this information and having to live with this constant feeling that nobody understands me and everybody around me thinks I'm crazy, and this feeling of isolation and alienation and all of that. All of these things that I thought were a curse. Well, it turns out they're actually a blessing. I mean, if God woke you up, if God touched your heart in the same way that he did to me, and for me, I've talked about, if you're somewhat new to the channel, I mean, I started my awakening process back in 2013, really. It was around 2012 to 2013. I wish I could tell you exactly when, but I know that it was very shortly after Obama was reelected for his second term. And, when Obama was elected the first time, I really wasn't awake at all. I mean, I actually bought into the propaganda at the time. Oh yeah, isn't that great? Now we have we have a black president. That's great. And, just went along with the whole idea. I didn't vote for him, but I thought to myself, well, and then 4 years later, after seeing what happened during the Obama administration, and then all the stuff with Hillary and everything else, I just, at a certain point, a switch just went off in my brain. And I realized that everything that I was seeing on TV was complete garbage. And more, I started to do my research and connect the dots and start to figure out, wait a second, none of this stuff makes sense. All of these people seem to be fraudulent. In fact, the more I scroll back, the more I zoom out, the more I start to see that the entire establishment system is a web of evil. And this enters my brain, and this started for me back in 2012. So the point I'm making is that God saw fit. Thank you, God, for touching me back then and getting me to wake up, because I've had years now to prepare for this moment that we're in right now. And for some of you, you've had much longer than that. And for others, maybe it's only been a matter of months, maybe a year. This past year, I know for this waked a massive amount of people up. I mean, like I've said, if you have any sense of honesty about you, then what happened in this election had to have gotten your attention, regardless of who you voted for. I'm sorry, but it was just so obvious. I mean, even with the mainstream spin that they tried to put on it, that they, because I watched clips of how they tried to explain this whole thing, how Biden all of a sudden in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning, just an avalanche of votes came in and they were all for him. And I mean, it even circumstantially, even just looking at it, just from a gut level, you have to say to yourself, what the heck? That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem like it's possible. And that's just it. I mean, that's why I have to hold, I have to hold the general public accountable for their judgment on that. It's one of those issues where you just, you have to be willing to call it the way it is. I mean, it was so obvious that this election was stolen. It's just as clear as day. And so a lot of people, this past year, that was what finally shook them awake. But this process that we've all gone through and having to know the truth and having to suffer through all of this insanity, to go through this period of darkness and understand this period of darkness for what it is, but also go through this period of wondering and questioning and going through all the fear, doubt, and insecurity associated with it. All of this was to prepare us for what's ultimately to come. And it is an extraordinary blessing. It's like a massive protective barrier that God put around you for when all of this stuff actually hits. And nobody can deny, at least nobody, in my view, I don't think anyone can honestly deny that we are approaching that precipice. The only thing that you could say is that, well, it hasn't happened yet. But beyond that, can you really make an argument that we're moving in the wrong direction? If you really understand what's happening, if you really believe in the devolution plan of the alliance, if you really understand what needs to occur before we get to the end of this thing, if you really embrace the idea, as scary as it is, that we're going to have to see some very, very scary things happen on American soil before we actually get to the end of this movie, is there really any evidence to suggest at this point that we're not moving in the right direction? Now, if you don't believe, to me, I don't think there is. But if you don't believe, and I don't think if you're listening to my show, you'd fall into this category. I think everyone who listens to this show is a believer in the plan, except, of course, for those folks who probably are here just to troll or something like that. But I mean, my core audience, everyone out there believes in the plan. If you didn't believe in the plan, sure, you could say on the surface, well, everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Well, absolutely. That's the plan. The plan is for everything to go to hell in a handbasket so that we can get to that point, that jumping off point, that 80% point where there's no other option but to have the military come in and take control for a brief period of time and unravel everything that all of this corruption, all of this evil, and present all of this to the American public. But it's true that, and I talk about this all the time, but, awakening comes in stages. So we're all ready, all of us, we're all ready for whatever is going to happen, because we've hit a point where we're not only awake, we're very awake. And there is a such thing, though, as different stages of awakening. So there are, I talked about the McDonald's example. There are so many other examples. I talked about the Cinemix not too long ago, which is this sweetener that they use aborted fetal tissues. I mean, there are a lot of people out there who are even semi-awake there, in terms of what's going on with the thing that goes in your arm or what's going on with the election, but are nowhere near ready to hear some of the information that's going to come out. And that information about McDonald's and Cinemix, that's as horrifying as it is. It's nothing in comparison to some of the other stuff. And so are people really ready for all this truth, for this avalanche of truth? And what's it going to do to the public, the psyche of the public? Is that a factor in terms of what the white hats and really ultimately what God himself is waiting for? I mean, we have to remember that God is in control. God is the one calling the shots here. I believe directly through his angels. I believe that God is directing every maneuver. And I think that it's his judgment in the end that really matters in terms of what we're ready for and when we're ready for it and when he is going to move. Because I truly believe this is a spiritual war, this is a spiritual battle, and at the end of this game, I do believe that God is going to reveal himself. He is going to reveal his mighty hand. That we are going to see a moment. The world is going to experience a moment. I hope several moments, and I hope it's not just a fleeting one, because any moment that we can spend in the presence of our Creator, well, there's no greater gift than that. But I do believe that at the end of this spiritual war, our Creator is going to make an appearance, and he is going to once again remind humanity that he is the Lord, and that nobody, no force could deliver us from this evil other than our mighty Father in heaven, and of course his Son, whose sacrifice, of course, reconciles us with the Father, Jesus Christ. And by the way, for those of you who aren't Christians, I'll just repeat this again. I embrace everyone under this tent. As long as you're a good and decent person, I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your ideology is. If you love freedom and you hate tyranny and you hate evil and you have a love for humanity and a passion for humanity in your heart, then you're welcome here. This isn't what this is about. I'm giving everybody my personal views about religion, and I'm sure that probably a majority of my audience are Christian. But for those of you who may not be, please don't feel put off and think that you're not welcome here. Because what this is about, and what we've been talking about all along, this is a spiritual war. And the only thing that matters at the end of the day, the only division that matters, is good versus evil. And good, just like evil, has many forms. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of different backgrounds and ideologies and beliefs and opinions and practices and religions that are amazing, wonderful, God-fearing people. I mean, heck, I even know some people who don't even believe in God, but I still consider them to be good people because they have decency at their core. And as far as I'm concerned, decency is love and love is God. And whether or not they acknowledge God, it really is, that's between them and God. It has nothing to do with me. That's how I judge a person, by their character. And of course, this whole system has been designed and orchestrated to get us to try to judge each other on everything else and ignore character. That's why we never hear any messages about character. Why, character building is completely gone from our society. Judson White pointed that out not too long ago. And that's an indication, of course, of complete devolution of culture. When God is absent, when God is removed, when God is taken away and subjugated and put on the back burner, or just, attempted to be erased altogether from a culture, this is what you get. But you see, like I talked about the other day, their portrayal of culture isn't really our culture. It's a lie. It's an illusion. It's what they're trying to sell us, but it's not who we really are. And I think that most people instinctually understand that. I don't know whether he's a good guy or not, but the actor Rob Schneider has put out tweets and statements before that, very truth and common sense about, what you see on TV versus what you experience in your life. I remember reading one where he talked about, if you start listening to your TV, you're going to be very confused, because then you'll walk outside and you experience that, your experience is going to be very different from what they're portraying on TV. You're going to find that people actually, for the most part, get along. People, for the most part, just go about their business and have goodwill toward one another. But you turn on the TV, and of course, they're trying to sell you the exact opposite perception to create the reality. But ties back into the manifestation, our thoughts, how they manifest our reality, and how they're able to control our minds. That's what they've done. They've convinced us through this elaborate mind control process that we all are divided and that we're all different. And that's what we need to focus on. And that's what we need to do is we need to push our own interests. I mean, why do you think that there's a million of these interest groups and lobbying groups and NGOs and all of these things? There are a lot of reasons for the NGOs, but for in terms of using them as a financial tool against us, but just in terms of our sociological structure, I mean, they're designed to fracture our society. Everything that the establishment does is specifically tailored and designed to break us apart. And I know I've been talking about this a lot lately, but since we're at the cusp of the Great Awakening, we have to come together as people, as one human race. We have to be continually reminded of who we really are, that we're not a race of people divided by in a million different ways. That's not who we really are. That's what they've sold us, but that's not who we are. And we have to recognize and embrace that. And we have to be very bold when it comes to being a force of love to undo the hateful system that they've created. And we have to start living and being the example of a different narrative, a truthful narrative of who we really are. We are creatures who love naturally. And that is our ultimate source of strength. That is not a weakness. We have to be that bold voice that ushers love back into the world and goodwill toward one another. And I think we need to be very bold about it and very unapologetic about it. And the more time goes on, the more as the light continues to flood into the world, I just want to continually, my heart just keeps opening up more and more and more. And like I talked about, when the heart opens up, what it wants to do naturally is it just wants to shower everyone else with love and everybody else with just joy and happiness and attention. I've talked about this before. Lynn Wood is famous for talking about this, that when this is all said and done, we're not going to care anymore about celebrities and status and money. We're not going to be chasing after the same things. We're actually going to rediscover what Americans, and not only Americans, but people all over the world had always known, which is a genuine love for each other and a concern for each other and an interest in one another. And that all springs from the heart. And we need to reverse this idea that they've sold the masses of what it means to be strong and what it means to be independent and all of these things, all of these ideas that have ultimately formed the tapestry of our society. They've all been ideas that have been engineered by the enemy. And so we, the truth warriors, we have to be the ones to reverse that narrative at a grassroots level. I mean, don't think for 1 second if you're doing things on a small scale that you're not making a difference. It doesn't matter if you touch one human heart, if you can change one person's life with your kindness, with your decency, with your compassion, with your understanding, with your ability to communicate. If you can do that to one person, you're doing God's work. And I think we need to just continually embrace that love and embrace that light. And we have to be the ones, we have to be the torchbearers. We have to be the ones who lead the way. And we are. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing that's happening. I mean, I don't know about you, but I drive around now and I look out my window and I mean, to me, the sun just seems brighter. Everything just seems to be more vibrant. Everything seems to be more almost technicolor. And I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel as if something, an energy in the world has definitely been introduced, a new energy in this world. I feel it. I'm a very intuitive person and I can sense energy. I can feel different energy. And this is a tangible force. Now, sure, I could sit here and I could try to explain it away a million different ways and rationalize it to try to make it seem as if it's not important, which of course is how my brain was trained, just like everybody else's. You actually have a spiritual experience, or you actually have some sort of experience that goes beyond the five senses, to chalk it up as some fluke. That's the way they've all trained us. But of course, we're reversing. That's the beauty of what we're doing here. We're reversing their programming. The things that they taught us, we're coming together, and each of us having our own experience, our own perspective, our own passion. We're all feeding this fire of liberty for humanity and an understanding for humanity. And that is what's bringing the light back into the world. That is why God is moving for us, because humanity has been moving closer and closer to God as time goes on. And I think that's what happens is, you start praying. I don't know about your experiences, but in my experience, in my lifetime, I've had a lot of experience where I've drifted away from God and have drifted away from prayer. And when you start to pray again after long periods, I find that it takes a little bit of time. It's almost like exercising. I know it sounds like a strange comparison to make, but when you first start exercising, it's after a long period of not being in shape and feeling bad about yourself and everything else, it takes a lot. I mean, it's like torture to bring yourself to exercise. It hurts. You're in pain. You're out of breath. You don't want to do it anymore. You're not seeing any results right away, but you keep at it, and you keep plowing through and muscling through, and believing in yourself, believing in the end result, believing ultimately that although it may take time, you're going to get there. One day you wake up and you start to realize you're actually having results. You look in the mirror and you say, wow, okay. And it's a strange metaphor, but the same is true for me in the sense of prayer. God wants us to pray to him, but he also wants us to develop and to nurture the relationship with him. And it's our responsibility to do that through prayer. And the more that you communicate with God, the more that God then communicates back to you. And the more blessings he delivers into your life, the more wisdom, the more discernment. And spiritually fit is what you'll become. And as time has gone on, I'm not as disciplined about my prayer as I should be, but the more time goes on, the more I communicate with God, and the less formal even that communication becomes. I just have conversations with God. For me personally, I always get down on my knees because I feel as if I need to humble myself when I'm in the presence of my Father. People may have different views on that, and that's fine. Like I always say, we're all adults here. We all have the right to our own opinions and practices, but I just get on my knees and I have conversations with him and I ask him for confirmations, for wisdom, for discernment, for strength, for health, to remove my fears, to remove anything that's blocking me from him. And the more time goes on, you step back and you take stock of your life and you realize God has performed miracles in your life. It just takes time for things to develop. And I think, again, I've talked a lot about this whole process being one that is designed to teach us. I think that God wanted us to teach, for us to learn and then be able to teach others the virtue of patience. Because the cabal, the system, they've completely destroyed that virtue in our culture. Even though most people can recognize that, good things take time to materialize, it doesn't change the fact that we've been programmed almost like Pavlov's dog to want it now and to have a really negative emotional response when we don't get what we want, like we're children. And a lot of people never broke that conditioning. They still have that. And I even find myself in certain situations falling into that same trap. The good news is now I can recognize that it's programming. I can recognize where it's coming from and continually work to deprogram myself. But there's no question to me that the world is changing, the energy is changing, the magnetics are changing. Everything is being reversed, and I can feel it at a deep, deep spiritual, energetic level. And it's absolutely incredible. I mean, the feeling that I have right now, the excitement that I have for the future is just unbelievable. And I talked about this the other day, how I truly believe that in a matter of months, the entire concept of what's possible is going to be completely redefined. So much truth is going to come flooding into the universe. And we have to remember that, oftentimes we focus, and rightly so, on how horrible and horrific these realities are. But we also have to remember the flip side of that coin, and which is imagine what it's going to be like when it's all said and done. And of course, it's never going to be said and done. I mean, God's creation continues all into eternity. But from our perspective, when this struggle is all said and done, imagine the beauty in this world. And then remember that you were chosen to help bring that beauty into the world. It's an amazing thing. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening this morning. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to me on all of my different platforms, Podbean, BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube. And I'll be back soon with another report, God willing. Godspeed, Patriots. I love you all. Patriot out.